Everybody ready? Do we have everybody online? Excellent. Welcome, everybody. We'll call the meeting to order. We have quorum. Adoption of the public agenda. Thank you, Mr. Davis. Do I have a second? Thank you, Director Kerr. Kerr. Boy, look at that. You just got promoted. Director Dahl. Okay, petition and delegations. Regulatory, environmental, and the state of the economy. Ken and Denise.
Hello, it's just me.
Just you?
Yes,
The floor is yours.
the floor is mine. Okay, I'll share my screen. I think you guys have a copy, a PDF, or Edith has it. I've updated it slightly, so I'll send another one after the meeting. Okay, now I gotta find it. Okay, so wrong date. Actually, is that even the right presentation? I'll get there. It's the 27th, right? Anyway, hello,
Yes.
everyone. Denise Mullen here. I'm the Director of Environment, Sustainability, and Indigenous Relations at the Business Council. Ken Peacock sends his regrets. He's our Senior Vice President and Chief Economist. So this presentation is a combination of work that he's done, work that my other colleague, David Williams, has done, and that I've done. So I'm just going to run through this, try not to read slides, but you can have it afterwards. I got to move this thing. And of course, I can give my contact information and anyone can call me. So here's the backdrop. Highlights are global growth is slowing. From a BC perspective, our era of mega project construction is over. There's some data in one of these slides that show you the effect of that. One of the effects is declining GDP, will be a further decline in GDP per capita, and GDP is just income divided by number of people. And that we have some very concerning indicators on labor market, business investment, and interprovincial migration. Our growth sectors are, and I think this is the presentation where I have this slide. If not, I have another one I can pull up and show you. Government spending and capital investment, but those industries that pay the bills, which I have a slide on, are the natural resources. And then so our challenges, which we'll get to throughout the presentations: falling per capita income, households under financial strains. That's what you hear. The proxy for that is a concern about affordability and standard of living. Weak capital, private sector capital investment, land-based issues, and then many of you may experience the taxes, regulation, and rising operating costs for businesses. So what's all this doing? It's increasing uncertainty. Costs are going up. We have, at the end, I have some slides on Clean BC, which is all about how we manage greenhouse gases. Many of you know how difficult it is to advance projects. I have some research underway to show that, and I'm worried based on what I've seen so far. I mean, I knew it intuitively, but now it's being proven with data, and all of that's weighing on investment growth and prospects. So the next slide, oh, there it is. So just a sec, it's taking a minute. So Ken built this, and it's basically shows you our export of goods and services internationally. It goes to the point of which sectors pay the bills. And we're going to rearrange it, but it's the green bits and the light blue bits mostly, and a bit of the orange bits. So about 2/3 of, actually, and the orange bits, 2/3 of the revenue that we generate from exports comes from the traditional sectors, many of which Vancouver Island knows very well, for forestry and some mining, aquaculture, agriculture. That's all in here. Those are the ones that pay the bills. And so you might have heard that, oh, the resource sector doesn't really matter anymore. And it's true. It's true that we have a diversified economy, but those sectors have an outsized, make an outsized contribution to our economy. We are a small open trading economy, so trade is critical. This chart, if you kind of is representative of our economy and what we do. Well, it is. Our strengths are natural resources, and it's everything from the upstream stuff to downstream. So when you normally think of upstream resources as the, forestry, getting a tree and doing something, or mining, digging in the dirt and then refining it. But actually there's a host of services and companies in urban areas, mostly in southwestern British Columbia and in other larger urban sectors, that are completely dependent on these resource sectors, to like getting a haircut, to engineering services or law firms. So don't believe anyone who says that natural resources aren't important to British Columbia. Actually, I should probably put this in slide mode, right? That would be better for you to see. I'll try. There we go. Now I gotta find my arrows. I guess it won't let me do that. Hold on, I'll go here. Okay, so just some immigration stuff, which we've all felt. This is a trend line for net immigration as a share of Canada's population. I'm gonna move this more out of the way. And we, over the last number of years, are here. Orders of magnitude higher than in the past. It's unprecedented in terms of how much immigration, as we've all felt, coming into Canada and British Columbia. So what does that look like? Not that what does that look like, but I'm giving you just some background facts. So inflation, so we all experienced the post-pandemic inflation where we were falling with the Bank of Canada using interest rates to manage that. We're now back up to 2%, and there's not likely, in our view, an adjustment that will happen downward in the near future. Okay, this is what I said at the beginning around large capital projects lifting BC's growth. So the blue is just GDP generally from the whole economy, and the orange represents the lift that we got from large projects like Site C, LNG Canada, Trans Mountain, Coastal GasLink, and they're all coming to an end. So these little orange bars go away, and this is the forecast for where we would be. And again, GDP is just the sum of all the income in the economy, which includes, people's wages as well as some profits from companies, etc. And then I think this has multiple charts. This shows you, so then taking GDP and dividing it by our population, you get a measure called GDP per capita. And it's a kind of a way to measure how big and how much you get of the pie. So the pie is GDP, and how much you get of the pie is GDP per capita. And because of those large projects, we caught up with the Canadian GDP per capita. But there's another directional thing, but we're headed back down and probably will dip below the red line and the national average, just because we don't have that lift, that orange bar in the previous chart. To get a sense of where we stand as in per capita ranking, so Trevor Tombe from University of Calgary has done this work, and he updates it every year. I don't know where 2004 is yet, but in 2023, British Columbia is 43rd in the rank of, I think this is 60. And if you look at sort of Alabama, we are equivalent to Alabama in terms of GDP per capita. That's a bit concerning. Trevor suggests that, and I think this is true, Canada and British Columbia need a renewed focus on improving productivity and economic performance, and the longer we wait, the larger our prosperity will get. And I think that's an uncontestable conclusion given what my colleagues and I do. we have written about a lot about this. Ken Peacock in particular does a lot of our labor data, and BC is unique among the province in registering effectively no private sector growth in the last 5 years. And that we're going sideways. So you can see in 2019, we're effectively where we are today in terms of private sector jobs. This is the pandemic, of course. Now, we look at, so there's some percentages of the growth rates, and you'll all get a copy of this for reference. And where have these jobs been going? Well, mostly into these orange categories, many of which you are well familiar with. So I looked at some data from the Vancouver Economic, the VIAC, I think they're called. And it looks pretty similar in terms of where your jobs are. So health, education, and public administration. And in the current labor force in your region, in those three sectors, is almost 6,000. And that's more than a quarter of jobs in the districts, while the ones that pay the bills, the resources, are about 6%. They're small but mighty. And this is how BC compares with other provinces in terms of private sector employees. So we lag all provinces. We're the blue. This is Canada, and this is Alberta. And then there's a, in between, there's a variety. That's not a really good news story either. Sorry, I've got two screens going because I have some notes going at the same time. Hold on. So then we compare it to public sector jobs. So almost all of the job growth in British Columbia has been in the public sector, and mainly in education, health, and public administration, and even more so in general government administration. And the point to take away from this is, from the two, public and private, is that you need a strong private sector to pay for public sector jobs. And if, as you'll see in the next slide, this is the case, where for every private sector job, we say here, for it's been 5 new public sector employees hired for every new job in the private sector. That was over the 2019 period. And compared in the past 2 years, it's 12 to 1. That's a pretty amazing statistic in my mind, and pretty concerning. I don't know if you agree, but I think it's concerning. So then the similar chart in terms of how BC stacks up relative to other provinces were here. And BC has the highest growth in public sector employees of all provinces, and even compared to Canada, which, if you've been listening to the news, also has had an astounding increase in the number of employees who work for the federal government. But we are almost orders of magnitudes higher. So this shows you where the growth has been across the province, and it has been strongest in the Lower Mainland and Vancouver Island. For Vancouver Island, I looked at that data that I mentioned, and it's 85% services, so public admin, healthcare, education. 33% of employment is within health and social services, and that's significantly larger than any other sector. Retail is the next largest, followed by public administration. So, government looms large on Vancouver Island in terms of what we just saw in the public sector growth and the kind of employment. Now, which industries pay the bills? So remember I said the natural resources are those that pay the bills. And in fact, when you look at the data, Statistics Canada data, this proves true. Now, we've written a couple of blogs about this, and this one for BC was updated recently. So when you look at your region, real estate, where's real estate? Up here looms large. And in fact, the analysis that I've been doing on projects proves that out as well. But there aren't many of these kinds of projects to lift the bottom line in terms of their productivity and how much they the real GDP worked or per hour worked. Employment in the resources sector, according to my data that I looked at for your region, is 2.7%, and they account for 10.6% of all businesses. 1,400 members of the labor force are in resources. Again, small but mighty, because the labor productivity of utilities, mining, and oil and gas are higher than the average. But mostly in your region, you're dominated by sectors that are below this 55, 54 point. And there's threatened aquaculture, which I think is next on the agenda, and a declining forestry industry. And this just gives you a sense of the kinds of salaries that come from these various sectors. It lines up perfectly with which industries pay the bills, the previous slide. Then you might be interested in some information on housing. And so BC's population growth is over 3% per year, and it's a 5-decade high, and that's mostly due to the federal government's decisions to ramp up immigration to around, I think it was 1.3 million. I saw an article in October that pointed out that temporary residents were over 3 million, or 7.3% of the population. But interestingly, even though there's people coming into the province, there's also been the largest net outflow of residents to other provinces, particularly Alberta, and that hasn't happened since the late 1990s. And change doesn't usually happen, or change happens, but it usually happens slowly. And the turnaround in people exiting the province in the last 2 years is actually stunning and precipitous. About 73,000 people left. And we've never seen that in BC before. But at the same time, we're getting people in, and this shows the ratio of in-migration to housing completion. And so this is the migration, and this is the housing completion. So an imbalance, which we all feel. Another chart on housing starts. So basically, we are back to 2019 levels. We hear that there's a lot going on, but actually it's less than 2019 in terms of housing starts. And we're one of the province with the fewest, where the number of new homes being started is below 2019 levels. Sorry, I didn't know Ken had it this way. And there's the data for that. I'm scrolling down. This just gives you another image of housing starts, and so BC housing starts per capita units per 1,000. So that's your number. So it's gone down. So increased immigration in, housing starts down, which is why we're experiencing, rising prices and shortage of rentals, etc. And this is just another view of it. Per capita housing starts have fallen over the past 5 years, and BC stands apart in that regard for any province in Canada. And this one, similarly, I know construction is a big employer in the SLRD. It's fourth largest behind health, retail, and agriculture. And the pink has never been so large. And if we don't get some more of this, we're toast in an economic sense. So now on to the budget. I hope you're finding this interesting. So this is our snapshot. So the February 2024 budget showed a 7.9 billion operating deficit, and that was forecast for 24-25. It was at the time the largest in the province history. And also there were forecasts, this comes not from our data, but from the government's data, that it would continue into the forecast horizon. And then on September 10th, unbelievably, and no one would have thought that this was possible, but the government increased the deficit by another 1.3 billion. So now we're standing at roughly, well, if you want to have a decimal place, it's 8.9, but you can say roughly 9 billion. So we're running the largest deficit in the country relative to the size of the economy. We've seen debt levels surge faster than any comparable jurisdiction. We've seen repeated credit rating downgrades that raise the cost of borrowing to fund government operating deficits and capital plan, and that's unsustainable. And we released a fiscal update late last week. If any of you are interested in it, it kind of tells this story. I'm happy to send it to Edith and she can circulate it. But this gives you the picture of where we are relative to other provinces. So here we are, largest deficit in the country, even larger than Canada's. And we're all worried about Canada's, and maybe we're worried about BC's. I hope we are, because as I said, it's unsustainable. And I don't think my next slide made it into this version. No, it didn't. But I can flash something up in a second if you want. This is our comparative debt load. So we were pretty good, and now we're going up higher, and that's public and private debt. Where are we? So to the point about credit downgrades, so we're at a turning point for the managing of our finances. We have the weakest performance of any province. S&P Global, which is one of the biggest rating agencies, has given us, we've had 3 downgrades. Some people will refer to the smaller entities and say, oh, everything's well, but actually these guys are an important indicator entity because they're so big and have a bigger picture than the smaller ones. Now, I just want to go on and do a couple slides about Clean BC. Many of you know it. It's the government's plan to manage greenhouse gases. We have, over the last year and a half, been out talking about it. We've written about it. I want to be clear, it's not our model, not our assumptions, and not our results. So you may hear, well, we don't understand BC's model. We don't know what kind of assumptions they're using, and we question their results. What we did, all we did, was take data that government had published, but it's really hard to find, and make it into pictures. And it is the plan. It is the economic plan, and the plan is to shrink the economy if you look at the numbers and the data. And this comes from their modeling that supports their whole GHG agenda. So just for context, these are our greenhouse gas emissions. This is real data. Everything's real. The only reason I have this in red is because I had to go to the federal government to find it, because BC hasn't published their numbers yet for 2022. And so when you look at the calculation difference, so from 2007, which is our base year, to 2022, we had basically a 1% increase in our emissions. And then in 2021 to 22, we had a 4% increase. So if we have absolute hard targets to achieve by 2030, 2050, and 2080, I think, the 2030 target would mean that we would have to reduce 5.2 megatons per year to meet the 40% below 2007 absolute target. This is an impossible target. It effectively means shutting down the economy. That's the only way to do it, for a variety of reasons. One, 2030 is 5 years away now. And if our emissions are going up, I don't think I need to tell you how difficult that would be, and especially in an economy that's already struggling. This comes directly from a sheet in the spreadsheet. So when I say this is about shrinking the economy, it's not me making anything up. This comes from their model. And in every single sector, there is a reduction in output. And this is relative to the reference scenario, which is like your scenario that you try to do to say how close is it to what's happening in a kind of business as usual perspective. So in 1 year, in 2030, the model predicts we will be $28 billion less well off. We've also done some analysis, but it's not published yet. I hope it is. That where it's the area under the curve. So when you start from the beginning of Clean BC and you go out to 2030, it's hundreds of billions of dollars less than you would have otherwise been had we pursued a different approach. Now, the only one that's showing up is positive, electricity. That kind of makes sense given the focus on the idea of electrification, no matter how difficult that actually is. But importantly, electrification and what we like to call clean tech is only 3.3% of the economy. And it is impossible for this sector to change the direction of this blue bar. Just impossible, mathematically impossible. It's just math and sort of social momentum too on stuff. So when people talk about, oh, clean tech can fill the gap and, oh, we can do this through electricity. No, electricity is only 17% of our energy demand anyway. So even that is a percentage of our total economy energy isn't big enough to have much effect. And then what does this mean? So Clean BC all in itself, absent any other trends and problems with the economy, means that, and I'll move this out of the way. Gonna put you really small in the corner. This is where we would hope to be. This is where we are using data that we know that exists from budgets and is the reference scenario that we're trying to say, or this gray line is the reference scenario. So we have some confidence the model can actually model what has been, and using a kind of business as usual, or kind of if we didn't do much else, we'd be on this trajectory. Still not as good as this line, but Clean BC makes us, what's the number? $4,600 lower, $11,000 per household, real income reductions, and that takes us back to a measure of prosperity that is around 2013. So we're going backwards. And we've been trying to raise this as an issue. I would argue that given a review of the NDP's platform, and they're in government and we elected them as British Columbians, that Clean BC hasn't gone away. It's just been diced up and sprinkled. And so this is the plan. Clean BC is the plan still. And we have some information on all of the measures, but this is where we're headed. And I think people can feel it. And I think that's part of the affordability arguments and concerns that British Columbians expressed before and during the election. So I got to move you again. Guess I could just do this. Nope, it's not wanting to move. Hold on. So a recap. So it's true that BC's economy was a tiny bit stronger than Canada's during that period. What is that? 7 or 8 years, and that's because of our large projects and also strong population growth. Because population growth does contribute to the gross GDP, but the more people you have, and depending on how fast your gross GDP grows relative to your population, what we're seeing is GDP per capita declining because of that. So a weaker economy in 2024, picking up a little bit in 2025, but we're still seeing per capita income fall, which we all feel. I mean, I can tell you a story. My son is a physiotherapist. He works in the hospital, and he feels poor making $80,000 a year, and he lives at home. And I know that there are so many other stories like that of his peers. We saw earlier on the public sector is playing expanded role in the economy. I'll see if I can quickly pull up another slide, but it's pretty stunning on the makeup of GDP and how much of it is actually related to government infrastructure, schools, etc., which we need. But if it's not balanced out with some private sector investment, we have the jobs issue, and we have declining GDP per capita, revenue constraints, etc., for government to pay for public services. And then we have in British Columbia rising payroll costs, changes to the labor code, if you were paying attention to that earlier in the year, employment standards changing, rising operating costs and complexity, and that all curtails business growth and hiring. And this was my first slide. That creates uncertainty, costs, all of these things weigh on the robustness and resilience of BC's economy. So conclusions, we have a productivity emergency, we lack investment, and I can prove that from my data analysis that I'm doing on major projects and Crown land permits and all that kind of stuff. And British Columbians have been very clear about their concerns around the rising cost of living. We need an economic plan. We need one that focuses on prosperity and one that kickstarts investment in all kinds of projects, especially those that pay the bills. And one that enables larger export of BC goods and services, not less. In fact, on that point, BC had done some work with the government a few years ago that proved we had lower GHG intensive goods. So if you think about a rising curve on both energy use and GHG emissions globally, would you want a steeper curve or a flatter curve? And we can contribute to a flatter curve, even if the curve is still going up. And I think that's an important thing that we never talk about. And there's some other things we don't talk about in that space, but that's kind of not why I'm here, but happy to talk about it at some point. And so to that point, we should be focusing on global emissions and not domestic emissions. Our hard targets on GHG emissions are damaging to the economy, especially given that we are, like the rest of the world, is 99.81% of emissions. There's not a lot we can do, just like the 3% and just like the 17%, to create an inflection point in the direction of either energy use or GHG emissions. But we can't hurt ourselves economically. And then we need to be clear in that context about, like, what are the trade-offs and whether how are they happening on economic and environmental issues. We're not trying to say sacrifice the environment for the economy, but right now there's an imbalance in the regulatory environment and the approach to our economy and economic plan for the well-being of British Columbians. And that's all I have to say.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Anyone have any questions? Any questions online? Oh. Director Davis.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for that presentation. That was a lot of information that we don't really see out there very often.
Yeah.
And there's some disturbing trends for sure. I wonder if you could speak just a little bit about what appears to be about to happen in the States with bringing in tariffs of potentially 25% and how that could impact us and what we can potentially do about it.
Well, I wish I'd been listening harder yesterday when we had that conversation internally. But it seems to me that Trump uses these kinds of, we're going to slap tariffs on you, as leverage for getting something that he wants. 25% tariffs, given how much we export to the United States, is damaging to the United States as well. So, all the Canadian premiers and the Prime Minister need to sit down and figure out what their negotiating strategy is to protect that relationship that we have with the United States. I mean, they're the neighbor. They always will be the neighbor. We can't change the neighbor. And we are codependent on trade. So will it actually unfold the way he's threatening? I don't know. I don't think any of us can guess, but I think negotiations and conversation around the harm that that does to both Canadians and Americans is a really important thing that has yet to happen, because he's not in until, what is it, January 20th or something, and then he'll be busy doing appointments and figuring stuff out. So depending on who he gets in and how we may have been able to have conversations before then will be critical. But it could have, let's say that it happened, it will be quite negative, as we all know. I don't think I need to do the math on it.
Thank you. Any additional questions? No? Well, thank you very much for your presentation.
You're welcome. Anytime.
Okay, you take care now.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, agriculture on the Northern Vancouver Island. We have Richard, the Government Relations Manager from Maui. Hi, please.
Good morning. I'd also like to introduce another presenter that's also come with me. It's our veterinarian, Dr. Tara McDonald.
Morning, doctor.
Morning, everybody.
Let's take a moment here to fire up my computer. Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you for the time and the opportunity to present this morning. As mentioned before, I'm Richard Opala. I'm the Regulatory Affairs Manager for the company. And just a little insight on what our company does here on the coast. We are a fish farming company, of course, and we are located in a number of different areas. We farm in the Port Hardy area, we farm also in the Quatsino area, and we also farm up in Klemtu. We used to farm in the Campbell River area. We only have 2 existing farms that are left, and that was due to a decision that came out from the federal government a couple of years ago, and a multitude of court cases that are ongoing in order to resurrect some of those sites. I'm just going to move on to our next slide. So currently we have 18 farms, 3 that are fallow. Most of the farms, as you can see on the slide, have been in operation for over 30 years. We are looking to continue operations here, even though we've had basically our output of production reduced by half. We typically produce about 45,000 metric tons of product per year. With the recent closures in the Broughton and in the Campbell River area, we're looking at approximately 22,000 less farms, or 22,000 less tons of production. With that, we've had a reduction from 2019 of 625 permanent staff down to about 330 as we sit right now. And I'm just going to start off a little video here of exactly what fish farming is all about. Edith? Okay. Yeah.
Say a word.
Thank you. Okay, thank you so much. There we go. Okay, perfect. So on the production side, as mentioned before, this year we're looking for a total of 27,000 metric tons. And that's, we're pretty confident that we'll be there with just a couple of weeks left of harvesting. When it comes down to the decommissioned sites, as I talked a little bit about, we see all these sites that used to exist within the Campbell River area. And right now we have an ongoing court case. One was brought up by the Comox First, not the Comox, sorry, but Weeway First Nations with regards to the decision to close down the sites in their traditional territories. Decision came out, but it was riddled with some challenging points that were in it. And so once again, we're back in court to see if we can get another review of this. One of the key things that we really focus on our company and that falls under my purview is sustainable initiatives and environmental impacts. When we look at what we do and what we recycle, it is quite important to understand that this all goes into I should say it's all forwarded on a global scale, and it's also done on an individual business unit scale. Globally, we just got a review that was done once again by the Fair Protein Producer Index. And once again, we won for this year globally. And so that was just announced 2 days ago or 3 days ago over the weekend, I guess, that we're going to be 5 years in a row as named as the most sustainable protein producer globally. With that comes our commitment to ensure that we move forward with using the most sustainable products that we can and ensuring that our recycling program is up to par. Challenges, of course, on the island come with the availability in some of the most remote areas of having to deal with things like plastics and composting. But with that, we've outsourced to a number of companies to deal with things like recycled nets, HDPE pipes, and metal recycling, which we do locally, and wood recycling, which takes place in the Lower Mainland. So because we source our feed and it all comes from the Lower Mainland, we have the ability to use the vessels once the feed is taken to transport back our waste products and make sure that they're resourced and recycled sustainably. So when it comes down to things like feed pipes and recycled nets, stats are right there. And we also use, as stated on the top, we use Gemini's state-of-the-art facility, and they last year have managed to compost and recycle approximately 250,000 kilograms of plastics, which is really important for us. When it comes down to our innovative practices, we have one site located in Quatsino Sound called Monday Rocks, and it was identified as being a test facility for some of our new technologies that have come out. And with that, we are going in for a second year after having very good success after our first trial of utilizing barrier technology in deep feeding and deep lights and using flow pressers that were resourced from one of our companies that supplies locally, Poseidon. And they've come up with some really innovative systems that allow us to oxygenate our pens, and they're only on demand, so they're using much less hydrocarbons in order to fulfill those processes. So I'm going to toss it over now to Dr. McDonald here, and she's going to take care of the next few slides on what our health program is.
So this is my area. I'm the veterinarian and fish health manager at Mowi Canada West. So my experience in the aquaculture industry is pretty broad. I've gone Norway, the east coast of Canada, and the west coast. My time on the west coast, I've overseen myself as well as another veterinarian. We have 2 full-time fish health technicians as well as a food safety lab manager, and that's our department. We complete a lot of in-house diagnostics, but we also have strong partnerships with local, national, and international laboratories. Of note, in particular in Campbell River, is the Center for Aquatic Health Sciences, which does a lot of our diagnostics and is a really important partner in our work. As you saw in the video presentation, we have screening from egg to plate. It starts from the broodstock or the parent fish, where they're very rigorously screened for disease to ensure that nothing is transmitted vertically, so from the brood down to the eggs, which some diseases can do. We also do a selection of genetically superior fish for the breeding, so ensuring that the parent matches are made to meet both production goals, fish health goals, looking at things like growth, disease resistance, sea lice, gill health. And there's been some really strong advances made in that in the past few years. Well, they're in freshwater, so that's the hatchery facility that was pictured in the video. We do multiple sampling and screening events, a minimum of 3 times for each group of fish that goes out. These are concepts like histology, virology, bacteriology, essentially a comprehensive, holistic diagnostic suite to ensure that the fish are healthy kind of from every approach. 100% of the fish that go to sea are vaccinated, as mentioned. These vaccines are targeting viral and bacterial diseases of concern, and all fish are screened for disease prior to transfer, which includes PRV. Once the fish are in the ocean, we continue this screening in the saltwater environment. This includes monitoring daily by the site staff. As mentioned, they're constantly looking at environment parameters, oxygen salinity, plankton blooms, all of which have an impact on fish health, as well as the outputs such as mortality rates, feed rates, their fish behavior, and then sea lice levels, gill health, skin health, those kinds of things that are checked with those hands-on fish monitoring. My technicians and myself and the other veterinarian are on site monthly at minimum, often more than that, depending on what's going on. While we're there, we're doing sampling for routine screening. So again, that histology, virology, bacteriology to get the whole fish picture, as well as doing more targeted sampling if issues are identified. For both sea lice and fish health, we are audited by DFO on a regular basis. When we talk about sea lice, we have multiple management options available to us. To begin, we're constantly monitoring for sea lice levels to ensure that we're being proactive. Weekly is 3 pens at a minimum. We report in accordance with our conditions of license. And as I mentioned, that is also audited by DFO. For our integrated pest management plan, we have a variety of treatment options available to us. And this is important because we want to discourage the development of resistance and also custom fit the solution to the situation. So we're looking at factors such as time of year, fish size, the lice life cycle, and these are all factors that I would take into consideration before ordering a treatment. In feed treatments, there's only one available, and that is veterinarian prescribed. We have hydrogen peroxide bath treatments available, also veterinarian prescribed. And then we have non-medicinal options such as mechanical sea lice removal and freshwater. Again, this is always going to be working within the natural environment and the salmon life cycle, both the farmed and wild populations. So according with our condition of license, we've got the juvenile salmon out-migration period, also sometimes called the sensitive period, which is from February to June every year. Then we have the adult salmon in migration. So when the wild salmon return to their home rivers, this is August to November roughly, depending on the area of the coast, that can vary. And then we have higher risk periods environmentally. So for example, you have your summer plankton blooms. Those can also be in the fall. The changing climate has made it where that can almost be year round these days. And then this time of year, of course, winter storms, which can make treatments challenging for the safety of our staff and the infrastructure.
Thank you, Tara. Have a couple of slides here just with concerns or with some information and some stats regarding economic growth in the area. So in 2023, approximately 255 million was spent on goods and services purchased in BC. Of that, 42% of it was spent on Vancouver Island businesses, approximately 381 of them. And 178 of those reside in the Campbell River area. And so just in the Campbell River area, approximately $62 million was spent in 2023. And I can say for 2024, it'll probably be very close to that number again. When we look at other community contributions, we look at Vancouver Island donations, which totaled $32,000. In Campbell River community donations, there were $8,000, and total BC First Nation community donations was $216,000, and that does not include salmon. So we definitely take the opportunity to reach out to a host of different communities and different organizations, and anytime they call up and want some salmon for a barbecue, we're more than happy to accommodate. When it comes down to community employment contributions, right now I mentioned we're down about half from what we were in 2019 due to the closures of approximately a third of our business operation. We have about 23% of our force is Indigenous workforce, considering that 5.9% of BC is identifies as Indigenous. That is a really healthy number, I think, and always room for growth in that area. We do farm, as mentioned, up in Clem 2 in the Port Hardy area. And at the plant, there's quite a few folks that work at the plant that are both from the Cluckla-Sequala, Guasala, Naquadak, and Guagil First Nation. We also have about 10% of our workforce comes out of Campbell River area, and approximately 16% of our company is female gender. And now time to talk a little bit about our famous transition plan. As everybody probably has heard or seen through media platforms, our federal government decided in 2019 that they would come up with a mandate to shut down open net farming and put us on land by 2025. After many revisions and many discussions and realizations that was spoken way too soon. There's been delays and reviews and a host of different manager, or I should say different ministers. So far, we're 8 years, 8 ministers deep when it comes to DFO. The most recent minister that we have, Diane Leboutillier, has come up with a transition plan. Unfortunately, when the plan came out on September 20th, we were expecting a plan, but we got a draft salmon aquaculture plan. 18 pages long, and at the back with 28 questions wondering how they're going to outreach to different communities, what's this going to mean to First Nation communities if it was closed down, what kind of plans we can actually, and what kind of equipment and innovations are available out there to implement, what the companies can actually do in a short period of time. And so right now we're into a phase of consultation, and with that, there was a delegation from the Department of Fisheries and Oceans over to Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, and a gentleman by the name of Ryan Turnbull, who is the Parliamentary Secretary for ICED and also works as a Deputy Minister for the Minister of Finance, is spearheading this process. Why the Department of Fisheries and Oceans are not doing it and spearheading it, we're not sure. But we do have Andrea Sear, who is DFO Policy, who has now been redirected as the Director General of Engagement and Partnership, and she's also spearheading part of these engagements. There is two bullet points on the bottom of this slide. They're looking for written submissions to the draft transition plan by January 17th. And there's also an interdepartmental task force that is currently meeting with a number of communities. I understand that Port Hardy met with the delegation, and there's still another opportunity to meet in the next couple of weeks, which I encourage anybody at the table that would like to really learn more about what transition is and would like to have their input on what transition and what aquaculture means to the province and what it means for local communities, to have your say and to definitely come forward and present what you need and what you would like to have in this area. And any questions?
Anyone online have any questions? I can't see you at the moment, so please speak up. Nope. Director Dahl.
Thanks for your presentation, Richard.
Thank you.
I just have one question,
Sure.
because the slide that said you donate $8,087 in the city of Campbell River.
Yes.
So what's 1,000 pounds of salmon worth?
Wow. 1,000 pounds of salmon right now. Costco price or?
Well, market price.
Market price right now would be, I'm thinking somewhere around, that's a hard question. I'd say at least $5 a pound.
I cook 1,000 pounds of Maui salmon every summer and have.
Yes.
I have since I think 2003, 03, 04, whatever the second year the community foundation was. So that doesn't quite double your number, but it makes a significant difference, and that's only one.
Yes.
So I know your trader's busy in the area cooking salmon as well. So that number is obviously well understated.
Yes.
And from almost every single golfer that supports charity in Campbell River and the person that cooks their fish, thank you for your support for the community.
Thank you so much for that comment. Thank you. Truly appreciate it. And yes, and 5 is just the number that I'm throwing out there. It could be definitely $10 a pound. I mean, at Costco prices nowadays, that's pretty much what you're looking at. Yeah, so thank you.
Go ahead.
Just had a question there. Just want to make sure I got this accurate. How many Campbell River area employees does Maui have right now, and what was their peak?
Oh, it just
Doesn't have to be exact. I saw 30 on the slide, but that
Yeah.
seemed low. But I'm not sure.
I don't have that number right off bat.
You can just estimate it. I'm not going to hold you to it.
Yes. I'd have to get back to you on that.
But I saw 30 on the slide. Is that how many employees in the Campbell River right now there is about?
That would be farm operators, but we also have folks that work in the office. And so those numbers are different.
Right.
Yes.
So 30 in the farm operation. I'm just curious.
Yes.
Guess what would be in like administration, if you will.
I would say conveniently, I'd say about 1/3 of our employees are from Campbell River, Strathcona area that reside in this and either work at our hatcheries that fly up north, or they're working at some of the remote operations. But I'd say I'd say 100.
Yeah, okay, good.
Yes.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a very rough estimate. Yes.
Anyone else? No. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
There is hard copies available of the presentation, is that correct? The publish it with the minutes. Okay.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, adoption of previous minutes. Thank you. Thank you. Business arising from minutes? Sorry? We didn't vote. Oh, I guess we should vote. On minutes, all in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Business arising? None. Notice of motions? Whereas forestry works in the communities in every corner of the province, from jobs to export to providing revenue to hospitals, schools, and roads and community. Whereas future forestry is at risk with the closure of over half of BC mills in 2 decades, the harvest levels failing to 40%.
So, Mr. Chairman, this notice of motion was delivered at the last, the inaugural meeting of this committee, I believe in May. I apologize, I don't recall who submitted it for consideration. I don't know if they're with us today, but it is on the agenda for the committee to consider whether to support the motion or not.
Whereas sustainable forest sector, everybody has a copy of the motion online? Perfect. Is there support for the motion? Somebody to make a motion? We have a mover. Do we have a second? Director Davis, any questions? All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Thank you. Director Dahl.
I just wanted to say we need to change the minister's name. Scott Ralston, and he's retired.
Okay, thank you. G, committee terms of reference. That the report from the CAO be received. Thank you. Second. Director Dahl.
So, Mr. Chair, if I can, there's been some discussion about expanding the terms of reference, both the terms of it and the makeup of the committee. So the motion before you that we have is, if it's supported, we'll bring back a report that brings back options for amending the terms of reference and the group that makes up the committee.
Thank you. And that was on A. And pardon me? So we'll vote on A. All in favor? Opposed? We have a question. Go
Hello,
ahead.
I have Michelle Pottage, or Director Pottage. What are the terms of reference being potentially changed to for allowing other people in the committee? Like what's the idea around that?
We'll bring back, thanks for the question, we'll bring back a report with some options, but that it was just to expand the committee to include, I believe, some non-political membership, again, options for that, for the committee's discussion, and as well as the terms of reference initially were to they look at the appointment of First Nations and what nations we would invite and have a discussion around there. So because we've only had one inaugural meeting, we haven't had that discussion. So it seemed convenient to bring back options for the nations and possibly other groups would help represent. The other thing that was mentioned about there, because we're a unique committee of 3 regional districts that currently can have 3 members on there, we've struggled and have challenged getting meeting dates and quorum for that. And so we want to ensure that when we hold a meeting that we know we're going to have quorum for that. So for today, we're thinly on the good side of quorum. And if we include membership that expands beyond the political group that we have here, we can help ensure ourselves that we can schedule meetings and ensure that we're going to have quorum.
A little bit more follow-up question. What kind of people are you referring to besides political people for potentially being on the committee?
Can be staff from local government, can be industry folks. Again, the report will just to be open the dialogue for it. So if you have some thoughts or other members have some thoughts about who you think would be relevant and important on that, certainly that would be an opportunity to bring that forward. So I don't have a laundry list of that, but encourage you to participate in the discussion. And if you have ideas, make suggestions to the committee.
Okay, thank you.
Any additional questions? All in favor? We already did that, didn't we?
Okay, yes.
That was on A. Let's go to B. B, that the committee recommended the terms of reference be amended to allow the appointment of additional members at the discretion of the committee on the same terms that are applicable to the First Nation representatives. We have a mover. Second, discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Old growth forest on Quadra Island, that the report from the CAO be received. Thank you. Second, Director Dahl. Discussion.
Just before Director Dahl, just so others are aware, this was referred to from the Regional District Board to both the First Nations Committee and the Natural Resources Committee. At the First Nations Committee, it was deferred to invite I believe the Weewakai Nation to come speak to it. So I'm not sure if Director Dahl has a similar motion or wants to speak to it, but whatever the committee likes.
Go ahead, Director Dahl.
I was just going to point out that there's been no consultation with the Weewakai, and I'll vote in favor of receipt, but I wouldn't support any motion going forward until there's been consultation with Chief Shakite and the Weewakai Nation.
Okay. So on B, all in favor? Sorry? We have sorry, I was looking at that one. On receipt, all in favor? Opposed? Seeing none, motion is carried. Thank you. Correspondence, none. New business? Director Dahl, do you have another motion?
No, the motion was asking for was to send a letter, and if someone wants to make the motion, I will vote against it. That's what my point was. Well, I'll vote against sending a letter to the Minister of Forests until there's been consultation with the Weewakai.
Yeah, just for clarity, that was the motion in the original report. I believe there was a recommendation to send a letter that Director Dahl is referring to.
Okay.
So there's nothing on the table, but that I believe was embedded in the original motion that was referred to the committees. And so again, at First Nations, we didn't vote on that motion to support a letter. We made I think it was a deferral motion anyways, to invite a presentation from the Weewakai Nation before we did anything.
Okay, but do we need a motion for that?
Well, doing that at First Nations, I suppose we could invite the nation to present at this one as well. it may be challenging to get them to show up to both of them, but yeah.
I think if they showed up to the First Nations Relations meeting and made a presentation, possibly staff or a member of that committee could let this committee know how that goes, rather than
Yeah,
hoping that the Wewakai Nation can show up at two different meetings to talk about the exact same thing twice.
yeah, no, I agree.
It would have been solved if they had simply been consulted before the report came to
Okay.
the board to begin with.
So we could do that, certainly. We're hopeful that they'll come, rep will come to the First Nations Relations Committee. We could, record that presentation, if you will, and play it for this committee for discussion. And there's a question up there.
Go ahead, Director.
My question is overall, like, what are they asking for? And yes, we all want to consult with nations. I understand that. But if they're noticing the old growth is being not managed like they new policies are, and they're falling through the crack, are we not wanting to help support that? But I do understand partly with the consultation with the nation. But what are we seeing that will change the information?
Go ahead, Director Dahl.
The nation hasn't been consulted. They never asked for this letter. This is an electoral area meeting that came up with this motion. But the band that has a lot of hands-on managing the resource wasn't consulted. And ultimately, they can override anything pretty much that the government would be wanting to do if they haven't been consulted. So the proper process would have been to consult with them before this came to the table.
Okay.
Does that help?
It helps. So I do get that they should be consulted, definitely. But not that we always have to be in agreement with the nations.
Okay. Any motion on the floor? No? Okay. On receipt, we already voted, correct? Good. Amendment items, closed session, none. Termination of meeting. Director Dahl, Director Davis. Thank you very much, folks, for being online today. Appreciate it. And we'll see you in the new year. Meeting's adjourned.
Have a good day, everybody.
Take care.